Now, this is chapter 8. No shortage, Lee. Of course. I've been here for a while. Yep. What's up? If I assume, it might be right? Yeah. Of course. Knew this supposed to happen. You have no idea. I know, it just happens earlier. And, how old do you know this? It's not that far. Of course, if I was getting to this. Yep. If I could assume, that might be cool. Okay. If I was trying to figure this out. Okay. It's a little bit familiar. Even since, by the way. Whoa. I know, it just happens a lot. If I could assume, that might happen. Right, of course. And how do you know this? It was supposed to be this far. Right, of course. Yeah? I know, it just happens for a while. Even since, by the way. Right, assuming still kinda cool. I know, it just happens for a while. And how do you know this yet? Not yet, the flea. Of course. I know, happens for a while. Okay. Now, I know what to do is. And I'm just trying to figure this out, okay? It's still cool, right? If I assume that might happen familiar. There, that should do it. Whoa, cool, right? If I assume, by the way. Of course, it's still kind of obvious. I know, I'm just trying to figure this out. Yeah? I know. If I assume, it might be cool. It was supposed to be this far, but I can't figure this out. Right. And how do you know this? Not yet, definitely. Of course. It just happens for a while. You know that? Right. And how you gonna figure it out? I don't know yet. Okay. How that's supposed to happen? I don't know. Of course. Happens for a while, isn't? Not yet, definitely. Of course. You have no idea. I know, it just happens. So, are we not gonna find them yet? It's still quite obvious. If they have to. Not yet, Flea. Of course. Knew this supposed to happen. Yep, and you tried to figure it out? Not yet, Flea. Of course. You have no idea. I know, it just happens familiar, isn't? Not yet, Flea. Of course. So it just happens for a while, wasn't? Not yet. If I could assume. That might happen for Murray. Right, of course. I know, it just happens. If I could assume, that might be cool. Right, of course. I know, eventually. If I could assume, that might happen. And for Murray, I don't know yet. Right, of course. I know, it just happens. If I could assume, that might happen. Right, of course. I know, it just happens for a while. Right. Okay. Alright, then now we're just gonna spoon about that. So it's still kinda cool, right? Not yet, definitely. Of course. Knew this was happening for a while. Yep. I'm trying to figure this out, you know? It's still cool, visually. And how I know this? Right, it was supposed to be this far, but I guess that's cool from now on. So how are you gonna figure it out? I don't know yet. It's still cool from earlier, by the way. You notice yet? No, not yet. Just happened for a while. Of course. I know, it just happens. So that's okay from now on. Except, I just don't know what to do. Right, are you trying to figure this out? Not yet, definitely. And also, I was trying to figure this out. This is Omega. Whoa. Cool, eh? If I assume that might happen. I was gonna spoons about that. I know, it just happened to me right here. Okay then. And also... Whoa. Cool, eh? It just happened to me right here. And I know what to do with that, by the way. It just happens to me right here. And how do you know this? It was supposed to be this far, but it just happens for a while. Right, of course. I know. It's supposed to happen for a while. Even since, by the way. Right, I'm just trying to figure this out. So, you didn't know yet? No, not yet, Flea. If I can assume, it might be cool. Right, of course. I know, it just happens for a while. Even since, by the way. Right, did I realize that before? No, not yet. It's still cool. If I can assume, that might happen from earlier. Right, of course. I know, it just happens, you know that? If I can assume, that might be cool. Right, of course. I know, it just happens for a while. If I can assume, that might be cool, right? Eventually. We don't know yet. Right, of course. You have no idea. I know. It just happens from earlier. Right, of course. You have no idea. I know. It just happens from earlier. Even since, by the way. Right. How are you gonna spoon about that? We don't know yet. Right, of course. You have no idea. I know, we're gonna let that happen. So you didn't know yet? No, not yet. It's still cool, visually. If I can assume. It's a little bit familiar. Right, of course. I know, it just happens. If I was trying to figure this out, or it might be, I just don't know yet. Isn't or isn't. We don't know. Okay, it's still cool. So, you trying to figure it out? Not yet, definitely. Of course, knew this supposed to happen. Yep. These spoons for a while. Not yet, definitely. Of course. And no, it just happens for a while. If I can assume that might happen. Why? And you didn't know yet? No, not yet. It's still cool from earlier. And how do you know this? I know. It's supposed to be this far or this far. I don't know yet. And how do you know this? I don't know. It's supposed to be this far, but this is kind of cool. Right, and you just know yet? No, not yet. It just happens for a while. Right, of course. I know. Eventually. If I can assume, it's still kind of cool. Okay. I guess I was gonna be here for a while. If I was gonna now. Of course. If I can assume. Yep. Who's trying to find others? Not yet, definitely. I'm just trying to get around here. Even since, by the way. And, you know, it's supposed to have to happen. Okay. You know, this is supposed to be. Right, of course. It's supposed to be, but I didn't know this. Yep, I agree from now on. Okay. So, you don't remember, right? That would be a no. Yep, agree. Okay, just remember. Whoa, cool, eh? If I can assume, we can't let that happen familiar. Right, how do we know this? It's supposed to be this far, but it's supposed to be that far. Wait, oh. Right, and you didn't notice yet? No, it just happens familiar. Right, of course. And how do you know this? Not yet, definitely. Of course. I knew this was supposed to happen. And how do you know this? We don't know yet. Right, of course. Let me guess. Are you trying to figure it out? Not yet, definitely. Of course. It just happens for a while. Even since, by the way. It just happens, you know that? Right, of course. I know, happens for a while. Even since, by the way. Right, of course. Meow? I know, Vigilante. Right. And how do we know this? Meow. Of course. Knew this was supposed to happen. Yep, it was supposed to be this far, but if I assume, that might happen familiar. Right. Of course. You have no idea. Meow. Right. If I assume, Vigilante. Yep. I have no idea. Of course. So you consume? Yep. And how do we know this? It's supposed to be this far, right? Of course. If I consume, Vigilante.